Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we're talking about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. And we are the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
I'm Ethan. Today we're going to be talking about persistence. We're going to talk about the definition of persistence. We're going to talk about, is it good to be persistent? Is it bad to be too persistent? What are some of the synonyms and maybe the antonyms, the opposite of persistence, and how it can benefit us in our life. It's been a while since we've done one of these talking about certain principles, so we thought that we'd bring it back. Attributes. We'll be able to bring it back to our creed and see if this is a certain attribute that we want to apply to our lives.
Let's do it.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare.
If I can change, and you can change, everybody can change!
Let us all unite! Let us fight for a new world, a decent world.
Okay, so one of the things that we first talk about is we kind of usually define what persistence is. And I found something that was interesting. It was a little graphic, and it talks about the difference between persistence versus perseverance. And I like this one because it kind of gives two different perspectives on a very similar word. So for one, persistence is the quality of stubbornly or resolutely continuing something in spite of opposition. And then conversely, with perseverance, it says perseverance is the continued steady belief or effort in spite of opposition. So perseverance is just like you're doing something in continual effort in spite of opposition, and it usually has a positive connotation, whereas persistence can sometimes have a negative connotation, like you're stubbornly doing that. Or another difference here is it says persistence is used to refer to actions with bad, good, or neutral purposes, while perseverance is typically used to refer to actions with good intentions or desirable goals.
I think sometimes too, persistence, and one of the things that, the act of persisting versus persevering, I think persisting is maybe more of doing, continuing or repeating the same behavior over and over again. Mm-hmm. I think with perseverance, it can be a little bit different, where it's not specifically attributed to one specific behavior, but persistence is almost continuing to do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, like if someone is like, they invited me into their house and they were very persistent, like they just kept asking. It's just like, okay, but you wouldn't say they persevered in asking me to come in their house. It's like, well, you kind of persevere through trials or through a goal, but to be persistent is to continually do the same thing.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like some of the differences.
So I had one. It's persistent is an attitude of continuously striving and committing to goals regardless of immediate rewards, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then I kind of went along the same lines that while persistence really kind of has a negative connotation, it often indicates that maybe somebody is stubborn or they're illogical, and that's kind of really comparative to the perseverance, maybe, which is maybe more logical, persevering through trials. So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, one of the stories I was remembering about that I feel like talks to perseverance or persistence is the story of Moses.
Yeah.
Like when he goes into Egypt and
got those plagues,
he's like, "Hey man, let my people go." And actually, we watched that movie with the Prince of Egypt just the other day with the kids. That's a great movie, by the way.
Yeah. Well, actually, I just recently read all the scriptures through the process, and I thought it was really interesting. But keep going ahead. I'll just add to it.
I was just gonna say he was very persistent with what he was asking, and the Lord promised him, just keep asking, and it's very easy to get frustrated. But he was just, hey, you gotta let us go, gotta let us go, gotta let us go. And it was just one thing after another after another. And I felt like that was a really good example of persistence because he kept persisting that they be let go and that they be allowed to leave. And then eventually he gave in.
One thing that I thought was interesting in reading the actual scripture story as we're going through the process of Moses, and one thing that I didn't know, and that it doesn't really particularly depict in the kind of the movies or whatever, is that a lot of these plagues that Moses said, he would go to the Pharaoh and he'd let people go, and then he'd say no, and he'd say, okay, well, I'm going to send this plague, or I'm going to do this thing. And then a day would go by or whatever, and the Pharaoh would say, please, call this off, fix it. If you do, then I'll let your people go. I promise. And then Moses would fix it. The birds would come in and eat all the locusts or whatever. And then Pharaoh would be like, nah, never mind. And then he would say, all the frogs would come in, and then all the different things. Almost every single time the Pharaoh was like, please, Moses, just fix this, and I'll let your people go. And then he would just turn his back. Nope, never mind. I was just joking. And it was just, yeah. But that persistent nature of Moses, for sure, yeah, kind of had that same goal. So one thing is that I was reading was that persistence actually gives you really vital experience. When you're persistent, you learn that each failure gives you kind of another opportunity to learn. And we actually did an episode on overcoming failure, which was kind of similar to persistence in a way, but I think maybe it was more similar to perseverance than it was persistence.
Yeah.
In overcoming failure and kind of succeeding through your trials. And we had, some different personal examples and things like that. But each time you fail, you become more resilient. And I think someone who is persistent is able to build that resilience and to help you overcome other challenges.
I'm going to ask you a question that
oh, geez.
I want you to think about.
Okay.
Can you give us an example from your own life where you've been persistent at something?
I would say, and I don't know if this is such a good thing, but one thing that I used persistence, we kind of had mentioned before, is when I was doing door-to-door sales, right? There's sometimes, and there was some days where, you'd get into houses and you'd make sales and it would go great, but I would say 90% of the days, it wasn't that. It wasn't all great. And you kind of felt like, I had to continue to be persistent. Like I had to keep doing the same thing. Like I'm still knocking the doors. I'm still putting in the effort. I had to be persistent what I was doing. And really, I guess when I got to the door and was talking with somebody, I had to kind of not push myself into the door, but to convince them that what I was doing was going to be beneficial for them. And in many cases it was, right? I was doing security systems and home automation systems for door-to-door sales. And there was definitely some people that really benefited from that. But I guess for me, I had to be persistent in saying, using some tactics to push my way through the sale. And I guess that's kind of a thing of persistence. An example that I had to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you?
I think that probably the thing that comes to my mind right now is that just being persistent as a father.
Yeah.
With these kids, like you've got to keep reinforcing these good morals, good ideals, what it is to be. In my family, one of the things we distinguish is between like sharp behavior, which is acceptable behavior and like things that a young man should be doing, versus sloppy behavior, like pulling your pants down, showing everybody your butt or something like that, which happens quite often. So that's sloppy behavior, or like running around, or just like being annoying or making annoying sounds, and like it's like we need to learn how to act. And so being persistent about that's not how we do things. We do it like this. We do it like we don't do that. We do this. That's parenthood itself.
I think along the same lines as that is telling a kid to do or not to do something, 10 times, 15 times, and they still do the same thing, and just being persistent and drilling in, trying to teach this one principle that you don't do this, or, don't leave your shoes right at the bottom of the stairs. That's not where they go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or don't put your hands in the toilet.
Yeah.
That's our baby, but the older
Yes.
boys don't do that, but the baby keeps doing that, so we have to close all the bathroom doors.
Yep. So I've actually been reading a book. It's called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, and it's pretty good. It's freaking long. It's like 500 pages long. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm on the 48 laws. I'm on law like 26.
Nice.
So law 15 was crush your enemies totally. That was the name of the law. Right? And so it talks about it shares these different 48 laws of, how to be more powerful in everything that you do. And there's a little quote in there. It talks about, they give some examples, some stories about these two generals that one general attacked the other general, but instead of completely crushing the other general's army, he captured the other general, and instead of killing him and just ending the whole thing, he thought he was going to be the bigger man and merciful and let him live, and then he let him go, and then that general built another army, and he came back and he beat the guy that had captured him.
Oh, really?
Right, and so it's kind of talking about like persistence and like just stick to it from the top all the way to the bottom, all the way till it's done. Crush your enemies totally. And there's this little quote in there I thought was interesting. It said, a viper crushed beneath your foot but left alive will rear up and bite you with a double dose. An enemy that is left around is like a half-dead viper that you nurse back to health. And so it's basically saying, like, if you were stepping on a viper, you're not going to halfway kill it and then just step off of it, because then it's going to turn around and bite you, right? If you're stepping on a viper's head, crush it, right? Be persistent and finish it. So that's kind of interesting.
I had pulled a similar thing. This one says it's from a journal. It's called the Small Wars Journal, and it says persistence as the 10th principle of war. And part of a quote from this, it says, Hap Arnold had it right. Give the enemy time to recuperate, and your efforts are wasted. Relentless engagement crushes your enemy's morale and will to fight. And it said, General Arnold recognized the value of persistence in attack, but in his day, persistence meant persistence in effort, keeping up the fight day and night and day out.
Yeah.
So
it's
kind of what you said.
Similar to that.
Don't give them time to breathe. You just be on them.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, when I was thinking about persistence, there's a couple stories that came in my mind. One of them was kind of the Aesop fable, the tortoise and the hare, right? That one where I don't have to recount the whole thing, but they were in a race. This tortoise and a hare. Obviously, the hare is much faster than the tortoise is, and at the beginning of the race, the hare just took off up the road so much faster than the tortoise, but he just kept going one foot in front of the other slowly. And then the hare was so far ahead, he decided just to take a little nap, and the tortoise just kept one foot in front of the other. Boom, 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 just keep going. Persistence. And then the hare ended up falling asleep and didn't wake up, and then he heard a bunch of cheering at the finish line, and he woke up and realized, well, maybe the turtle passed me, so he started running towards the finish line and caught up to the turtle, but didn't quite make it there before the tortoise crossed the line. And so that constant persistence of one foot in front of the other was beneficial. And the other story was the little engine that could. That was another one that kind of came into my mind. I was thinking persistent. All right, this little engine that's trying to carry this heavy, heavy load over this tall mountain is just, I think I can, and just not giving up all the way up and over this hill.
Yeah, one of the people I think that I admire as far as persistence goes, I mean, look at Elon Musk and all that he's accomplished. with SpaceX, he tried to buy these Russian rockets,
Yeah.
and they were like, we're not doing anything. And then so he's like, okay, well, I'm just going to learn rocketry, and then I'm going to build these things from scratch. And then, he had 3 chances really, and first 2 of those rockets exploded. And then he's like, okay, this is the last chance. We got to get a ride. And he got a ride. And then so many things, even with the Tesla, the models that he's building. There was one time, I think I was listening to a video, I think he said it was like for several years where he just basically lived on the factory floor, slept on the factory floor. I have a quote from him about what he said here. He said, I always move my desk to wherever. Well, I don't really have a desk. Actually, I move myself to wherever the biggest problem is at Tesla. And he said, I really believe that one should leave from the front line, and that's why I'm here. He said, I'm personally on that line, in that machine, trying to solve problems personally where I can. He said, we are working 7 days a week to do it, and I have personally been here on Zone 2 module line, 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, helping diagnose robot calibration issues, so I'm doing everything I can. Like, he was literally sleeping there. He said he was getting 3 hours of sleep at night, and then he was just all over the place. He had a cot and a sleeping bag, and he would just go. And he said in an interview that I heard, he's like, yeah, I probably know more about manufacturing than any human alive right now because of all that I was involved with and all the technicals and putting together these cars, solving these issues, all this stuff. And they had a quota that they had to meet to get these models rolled out. And so he worked like heck to get there. And respect for the guy, dude. He's persistent and he makes it happen.
For sure.
And I think it's cool that he bought Twitter.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
So I kind of went on, the next phase for me was, so how to be persistent. How do I be more persistent in my life? And so there's a couple different ways. I have 5 ways how to be more persistent. And then I want to tell a story. So one of them, the first one is dream big, but start small, right? You can't, you got to eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So number 2 is know the reason behind your goal. If you have a why, then it's a lot easier to stay motivated. Number 2 is rest, don't quit. And so, hey, if you need to take a rest day, that's fine. Don't just completely burn yourself out to the point of you're like, I'm so done. I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. Rest, don't quit. Number 4 is find a different solution to your setbacks. And number 5 is don't be afraid to start again. Mm-hmm. There's 4 different ways to be more persistent. And so there was a story. We actually talked about Socrates and Socrates.
Yes.
That's what Bill and Ted's which one they called him. So Socrates, there's a story about Socrates. So this young man came to Socrates one day, and he said, Socrates, how are you so successful? What is your key to success in life? And he told the young man, he said, you want to know what my secret is? He said, meet me down by the river tomorrow morning. And the guy said, okay, all right. So he met him by the river. The morning came, and he walked down the river, and Socrates was down by the water. So Socrates said, all right, well, come with me, follow me. And so they walked down into the water, and when they had walked all the way in and they were about up to their necks, Socrates turned around and took the guy by surprise and grabbed his head and just pushed his head under the water. And this guy is flailing and flinging and wrestling and trying to get out from under the water, but Socrates is just holding him down, just holding him underwater. And so he holds him underwater until he thinks that, okay, this guy's about to pass out, right? Maybe he's turning blue or whatever else. And then he finally lets the guy up. And the guy shoots up out of the water and gasping for air and just is like, what the heck, man? What's going on? And Socrates asked him, what did you want most when you were down there under the water? And the guy was like, I wanted air. And Socrates goes, that is the secret to success. When you want success as badly as you wanted air, then you will get it. There is no other secret.
Yeah.
And so I liked that. I'd heard that story in a couple different iterations, a couple different ways of telling it, but I liked it because it was almost like that that persistence of having a reason behind what you're doing. You know, what is your air? If your goal is to make money in your life and that's your air, then you'll do anything you can to do it, to make it, to make money. If your goal is to, be humanitarian, give humanitarian aid or whatever else it might be, or solve a certain problem. You talked about Elon Musk, right? It's just like if it's something you want so badly, then you will be persistent and gaining that one thing.
Yeah. Totally. One example that I had of persistence was one of our past presidents, and that's Abraham Lincoln. If we I can give you kind of a walkthrough of his life and some of the successes and failures, well, some of the failures and persistence that he had. This was basically a man who had failed in business at the age of 21. He was defeated in the legislative race at the age of 22. He failed again in business at age 24. He overcame the death of his sweetheart at age 26. He had a nervous breakdown at age 27. He lost the congressional race at age 34. He lost the senatorial race at age 45. He failed in an effort to become vice president at age 47. He lost a senatorial race at age 49. And he was elected president of the United States at age 52. So I wouldn't call him or dare to call him a failure, but rather someone who was persistent in what he wanted and continued to pursue that dream.
Which was government.
Yeah, which was a public servant. And so he did. And, despite all those setbacks, he was still able to do that.
Now, kind of move on to the next thing. What I thought was, we talked about at the beginning that persistence potentially has a negative connotation to it, right? When does it go too far? I think what makes us keep pushing, when would it be wiser to simply just let go and just to say, okay, that's enough of that. Now, maybe it's time to move on, right? And if you feel like you're just hammering your head against the wall and it's just refusing to stop, you might find that the culprit might be that what you're doing is not right.
Or if you're beating the dead horse.
Yeah. Or, it could maybe be fear, right? Maybe a lot of times people get fearful and they back out too soon out of something instead of being persistent. But one thing that I actually looked up, there's an article that I read that it said, are you quitting too soon or staying with it too long? And it kind of talks about the balance between quitting too soon, which is being fearful and just backing out, or staying in too long and just beating the dead horse. And it says some people really give up too easily when they hit just a small bump in the road. They just say, "Oh, I can't do it anymore. That's too hard. I'm done." And others keep trying way too long, way beyond when the quitters would have quit so long ago, and you're actually losing the potential for other opportunities. So there was actually 3 questions that help you to decide whether am I quitting too soon or am I sticking with it too long. And the first question is my heart still in it? Right? And actually, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, so the first question is my heart still in it? Second question is, can I achieve greater results by simply moving on to something else? Right? If my goal was to make money and I've just been doing this same business, fighting this same business for 10 years and I'm still not making any money, then could you maybe make more money if you transition to a different business? or whatever else it might be.
Yeah.
And then the third question is, knowing what I know now, would I start this task today?
Mm-hmm.
So is my heart still in it? Could I achieve more somewhere else? And knowing what I know now, would I still start this same thing?
That makes me think. I told you I was reading this book, 1776, and we've talked a lot about George Washington on this podcast, but there's this, in the earlier part of the war, he had all these troops from all over the place, and these people were just, regular people, but they were backwoods people, man, and he actually didn't like these people. He was like, these people are the most random ragamuffin assortment of men I've ever seen, most undisciplined. And in some of his personal letters, he was like, these people are awful, or in some cases he was like, I don't want to be here. And one thing he lamented, he's basically confessed, these were personal letters, that he's like, I wish I had never taken this command. He's like, I just assume, he was almost saying, I wish I had just signed up as a regular militiaman and I just bring my gun and just show up and be one of the crowd, because they didn't have any gunpowder, they were out of all this, they were running out of food, it was the wintertime, and everybody's fighting, and they've literally burned every scrap of wood in a mile radius of the camp, so there's no firewood, and he's just like, this is absolutely miserable. I don't want to do this. These people are annoying, because they get these very different people. Like, he was from Virginia, and Mount Vernon.
It was mountain folk.
Yeah, and then he had some of these, and he had some people from New Hampshire, people from these different pieces of the Continental Army. It actually wasn't called the Continental Army until a little bit later, but he was just like, man, this is a mess of people. I don't even know if I want to be here. But his heart was in it. And he had that determination, and I think he knew that battle and that his leadership would turn the tide of the nation, and he told his men that very many times, and so maybe I'm so glad that he was persistent in that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if this is actually an example of persistence, but I thought it was really interesting. Maybe we do an episode on this later, but I was saying that I had been reading this book about, or actually I listened to a book, and it was called, I think it was called like Bad Presidents or something like that, or President Fails and something. It went through a bunch of different presidents and different failures that they had, and just interesting facts, and maybe if they were bad, if they seemed bad for some reason. One fact I thought was really interesting was Andrew Jackson was, I don't know, 5th president or one of those, 9th president.
He was born here,
in
South Carolina, just right next.
So he was a rough guy. In his life, he was in over 100 duels.
What?
Yeah,
really?
He was in over 100 duels in his life. Isn't that crazy?
Did he get shot in any of them?
So there was a couple of them. There was one specifically that said that he got shot in the chest, and he got shot in the chest, but he purposely didn't fire because he didn't have a good shot on the other guy. So he got shot in the chest, and then as he was falling down, he raised his pistol and he shot the other guy, and he killed the other guy.
Oh my gosh!
But then he ended up surviving.
Wow.
And it's just like, I don't know, maybe you can apply that persistence. He was persistent in always wanting to do a duel, I guess. I don't know if he was the one calling for the duels, or if he was just a jerk and everybody else wanted to duel him. I don't know. Maybe let's do some research into that one, but
they have a museum here just in the Waxhaw area, the Museum of the Waxhaws, and that's where he grew up.
Yeah.
There was like a massacre here just in South Carolina. Some soldiers were leaving Charleston, and in the Revolutionary War, and then some British folks basically massacred all these guys. And then all those guys went to a country home to get healed by his mother. And he was there helping on them. And then he got captured by a British officer, and the British officer he was mouthing off or something to the British officer. The guy drew his sword, came down right at his face, and he put his hand up, and it sliced his hand, and then it also cut like right into his eyebrow, or right into one of his eyebrows. So if you look at pictures of him, he has a scar right into one of his eyebrows from where that British officer almost sliced right across his face.
He's got one of those cool Jason Momoa scars.
Yeah, exactly. Except for that one's is fake, I think.
Yeah, that's just let's just put a line with the clippers into my
yeah. But I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Way sidetracked, but I'm sure he was persistent.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
So, yep.
I don't know. We had kind of put some quotes together. I don't know if you had a quote.
Yeah, I just had a quick quote. It was essentially, persistence is the ability to stick with something and adjust your vision when the going gets tough.
Nice. I had actually put two quotes together for this one. So the first one is, knowing why you are doing something will aid in your ability to persist. This will build resilience, which in turn will help you be stronger in the future. So knowing what you're doing will aid in your ability to persist, right? That's the first one. The next one is, quitting is not failing. Sometimes the juice is no longer worth the squeeze.
That's right. Discretion is the better part of valor, isn't that what they say?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's excellent. Well, I think that this is an interesting principle, and knowing that balance, deciding that balance. And you gave some great tips on how we can decipher whether to continue or to give it up and move on to something more fruitful. So it's an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
From an economic standpoint, it's like, what are you giving up to do this thing, and is it worth it? And if you could be getting more from doing something else, then do that other thing.
Yeah. And I really like that too. And the first question that you ask when you're trying to decide, should I keep doing this, is my heart in it? Mm-hmm. Right? And if your heart's not in it, then is it really worth your time? Yeah. I mean, if it's something you absolutely hate doing, then, I maybe even apply that to like a career or a job or something like that. If it's something that's just so miserable that it's like affecting every aspect of your life, is you have to kind of weigh it out. Unless it's paying a ton of money then for you to stay, or
even if it is,
yeah. I mean, it's a balance. It's a balance.
You're not
a
tree.
Weigh out.
Move.
Yeah. Could I do better somewhere else? Could I whatever else? And so I really like that. I think that's something I'm definitely going to apply to my life, not just on, I guess, to any aspect. Is what I'm doing continuing to bring value into my life? And if it's not, then cut it out.
Yeah.
Move it to go a different direction.
Totally. Well, this has been great. Thanks for sharing with us your examples of persistence.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's maybe find out how we can apply this to our life and build that creed together.
Let's do it.